Hello and welcome back to another episode of DCU Daily. And of course, today is, if you're in the US, Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're enjoying your time with your friends and family. We are here, of course, to give you the latest from the world of DC. So we have a few news tidbits we'd like to get into. And then, of course, we also have a fan casting for you today. If you click through on the thumbnail, then you know we are going to be talking about Shazam or Captain Marvel, depending on if you're a DC purist or not. We're going to be trying to figure out who potentially could be a good casting for the new DCU because it's probably gonna be a character we'll get to see eventually. But while we don't have a Shazam project on the horizon right now, it's something that might happen down the road. So we wanted to see which of the actors out there today might be a good fit. So to do that and so much more, of course, as always, I've got with me John. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. That we're talking about Captain Marvel, not Shazam. Captain Marvel. That's how it should be. All right. So
I see where you land on that debate. Okay,
yeah. All right.
fair
So
enough.
I'm just saying.
So,
Just
it's
saying.
it's fair. It's fair. Well, before we get to that, we do have a few news items to get into. Of course, you know what's going on in the world of DC. What are people talking about on social media? Speaking of which, a lot of people out there are sort of marveling. See what I did there at the new Lois Lane variant cover as Superwoman. So this poster talks about how Superwoman is now taking center stage on a cover that is so perfect it demands that she be seen in a live action film. And of course, it's not the super girl, but Superwoman. So we know in the comics there's been iterations where Lois Lane essentially gets powers.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of similar. I would imagine the closest thing people would want to compare it to is like, oh yeah, you know when Pepper Potts showed up with the Iron Man suit at the end of Avengers Endgame. So it's something like that. But
Yeah,
this is part of the
that's
cover.
it's
Not
pretty awesome
it
looking. Not
looks
gonna lie.
great. Like it looks amazing. I like the shoulder pads. Like you got the logo there with like just the one golden color, and
Is she wearing?
the
She's
big
wearing
logo
gloves,
here.
right?
Gloves?
Yeah, it
I
looks like
don't
she's
think
wearing
so.
gloves.
I
I
don't
think
think
so. I
those are
mean, it's different
gloves.
from her skin tone. So the gloves are
It could be
yellow. Her skin's
lighting.
white. So
I
you
don't
know.
know. Well, I mean, you know what? There's a better look at this. So this is from Screen Rant, right? Like this is basically what the post is about. Is this article? So, um, and of course, advocating that we get to see Lois Lane's Superwoman. So let me see if I can open up this image because this is the full cover. See if I can fit it into like our window here. So this is the whole thing. I don't think those are gloves, man. I think
I think
that's
that
for
go up to the thumbnail of the exit out of that. Go up to the thumbnail. Yeah, she's wearing
this.
gloves. See,
No, I no. Those look like
you,
wrinkles on your head. I don't know. Are they?
those look like
It would.
gloves.
I don't. Okay. Personally, I hope
Like
they're
the
not
skin
gloves.
tone is clearly different. Like it's a yellow glove and she's white. So
It looks like skin tone to me. I don't know. I don't. You might be right. I personally think they don't look like gloves. I also don't want to see gloves. Gloves always look. Gloves to me is like one of those things that a bad guy wears, but not good guys. Like how many superheroes do you know that wear gloves? I know,
Batman.
like that's different. Okay, you know. All right, of course you. That's different. I'm just gonna say that's different because Batman always toes the line
The
too. He's
Punisher.
supposed to, but again,
Moon
anti-hero,
Knight.
anti-hero.
Spider Man.
You know what? You made your point. I will concede to you that there's a lot of heroes. I'm just saying. To me, it doesn't look like gloves. You guys, let us know in the chat what you think. Are these gloves? We can't seem to decide here. But the rest of the suit is great. I don't know what the yellow things are on the waistline.
I think they're supposed to be like the utility belt. Like
Yeah,
that's.
equivalent. Yeah, but like, why would she? I mean, it's not like Superman has a utility belt. I don't know.
Well, I mean, he
That's
has a belt.
he
That's
does
supposed to be
have a
like the
belt,
belt.
but that's the
But it's
belt to hold his underoos up. I imagine,
yeah.
right? Like,
But
yeah,
it's
because
just like it's a way to break up the suit. All right. It's like it's
I get
blue.
that.
Put the little
Yes.
dollops there, and then there you
Mm-hmm.
go. It breaks up the suit.
It's a very form fitting and it's a very slick suit. I will say I really love the design. It does kind of take inspiration from, and I do also like the shoes, like the silver outline there, because it again breaks up the suit and like the knee pads. But I will say the oversized logo sort of reminds me of that Supergirl design that was used in the Flash. You know, like to kind of like it
Hmm.
covers much more of the chest area. Uh, the Superman logo always looks better when it's bigger than when it's like the smaller one, like the Brendan Routh one. But it's good. It's good to see this. It's a comic that's gonna be out there. You guys can watch. You guys can read it, and of course, Superman comes out next year. So then, maybe we will get a Lois Lane that eventually ends up becoming Superwoman in the DCU.
I mean, he is inspired by All Star Superman, and
Mm-hmm.
Superman does give her powers there, so it's entirely possible that
Yeah.
it's unlikely,
It's
but
I wouldn't mind seeing Rachel Brosnahan play as Superwoman. It would be
Um,
great. I think
I
she's
know
definitely gonna
because
do it.
I know in the comics recently that the Rebirth line, like the New 52 Lois Lane,
Mm-hmm.
became Superwoman and then like died immediately. And then the Superwoman comic book line was about Lana Lang, who got these like energy like powers,
Mm-hmm.
and then by the end of it, I think she gave them up. It was a pretty decent run. Like it was
Mm-hmm.
she was like Superwoman versus Ultra Woman, who was Lena Luthor. I don't know if it was Lena, but it was Lex Luthor's sister who like he hid, who was like the real genius, and like he
Right.
hid her because she was
That's
like
what the
disabled.
well they
Yeah.
played off of that. Well, not necessarily the disabled part, but in Supergirl we got to see a lot of Lena Luthor. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I know it was like nobody knew Lex Luthor had a sister and she was like disabled and stuff, but she was
Right.
like smarter than he was, and like he
Mm-hmm.
took credit for all her shit. And then she like went crazy and then
Yeah.
became Ultra Woman, who was like this skyscraper big like mech suit with like a disembodied head attached to it. It was honestly it was pretty cool, but it
Yeah.
was insane.
Yeah, I think this suit in particular looks amazing, and whichever direction they go in the DCU, maybe hopefully we can get a Superwoman, live action version eventually. And I think this is probably the best designed Superwoman suit that we have seen to date. So with that in mind, let's keep the ball rolling here. Of course, we do have to kind of switch over to talking a little bit about Batman, and then we're gonna go back. We have a lot of Superman related news as well. So Jeffrey Wright. This is coming from an Inverse article, so it looks like he was being interviewed for a project there, and he was asked about the Batman 2. Of course, we are expecting him to come back to play Detective, Jim Gordon, and in doing so, people are wondering, like, we have been wondering, where is the script? When are we gonna get, this new movie? I know we're gonna get it in 2026, but I'm like, we're all wondering because we keep being told that the script isn't still finished yet. So, um, but he had this to say. He said, "I'm excited about getting back there. I haven't read anything. I haven't talked to Matt Reeves for a while, but I look forward to getting back there." And it's kind of similar to what Zoe Kravitz said, right? Like she was not very sure. She was kind of coy. She's like, we know Matt Reeves is working. It's like they're all told the same line, the way that, Steve Agee and stuff told the line for James Gunn about like how James Gunn likes to have the scripts ready before anything else happens. Everybody in the world of the Batman seems to all be saying like, hey, Matt Reeves is working on it, and that's about it. Like we'll see when we will see. Nobody seems to know exactly what to expect. So what are your thoughts on this? Does this again to you gonna give you some anxiety around, are we gonna get this movie in 2026? Are they gonna push it again? Or are you
I
just
mean,
looking at this and being like, he just doesn't have the script yet? Like, what are your thoughts?
I think it's just like he doesn't have him. Matt Reeves is still. It would be stupid of them to delay the movie again, and like it would just be so ridiculous. Like by this point, we fucking had Batman Returns, and because that was about 3 years apart. But like that's when like everything like had to be fucking practical and shit, and like everything had to be like in camera, all this other stuff. So it's like, what the fuck are they? What are you doing? Like this is just writing. Like it
Mm-hmm.
took more time to write the script than it was to fucking make the movie back in the day. So I don't know. It's just like I mean, at the end of the day, as Liz said, if it's good, it's good. Then like the wait was worth it. But like I'm just like sometimes when you're taking too long for something, you're overthinking every possible facet of your
Mm-hmm.
writing and you get in your own head and you think it's the worst thing ever. You throw the entire thing out, you do it again, then you're like, oh, this is garbage. And then you're like, ah, and then you fucking like keel over from like a fucking stress induced heart attack. So,
It
it's
sounds like you're speaking from experience there.
what? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What are
um,
you showing me? What are you
you
showing
showing
me?
me. Speaking of which, Penguin. Remember to fight for justice, guys. Remember to fight for justice for Wick. That's what we're looking for here. But yeah, no, it's To me, something that again further reinforces that they're not as far along as we'd like to think they are. The fact that we don't have a completed script, or certainly not one that the actors have gotten yet, leads me to believe they're not gonna like start rolling out this movie at the beginning of the year. Like we are literally a month and some change away from 2025. So I don't think the Batman starts filming until probably at least the springtime. Because also, they need to. Hopefully they've been building the sets and all the environments. I know maybe some of the ones from the first movie will hold over and they'll reuse them. But then also, of course, they gotta build new sets because there will be probably action set pieces that take place in parts of Gotham we didn't get to see in the first movie, interior sets that we didn't get to see in the first movie. So I hope that the pre-production work is still going well and they're on track to start filming next year, because I would be worried if we get to like February, March, and we're still hearing things like, oh, I haven't seen the script. Matt Reeves still hasn't finished it. Like James Gunn is still telling us like, hey, he's working on it, but it's incorrect that he has finished it. That's not true. Like those are the stories. I'm like, look, I feel like the reason why we're so impatient is because everything from this franchise has been so good so far. And while with the Penguin, they did a lot of exterior shots in New York City proper, I do think like with how this Gotham is portrayed, they need to, continue to kind of play off that vibe where this Gotham is noir enough that that it's a step removed from the real world, and yet it feels very grounded. But of course, speaking of Batman, John, since Matt Reeves is taking his mighty damn time working on the next movie, is he in danger of losing his lead star? Because if you go off Scooper Daniel RPK, Robert Pattinson reportedly had a meeting with Kevin Feige for a potential role in the MCU. I don't know if this is a trust me bro or thing, or I can even
I
put
think it's
any
safe to
level of
say
credence to it.
grain of salt.
you
No,
know?
like you really think that this dude who has had a boner for Batman, as he's explained in many interviews, how much he fucking loves the character, how much he is the character, how it's like a dream for him to play the character, how much he loves Matt Reeves, and like you really think he would jump ship from playing Batman to some fucking
Like,
nothing role in
yeah.
Marvel? Like, come on,
Like it's
that's
fucking like
ridiculous.
Batman. It's not some random, like you said. Like it's Batman is one of probably the two, three most recognizable characters and most important superhero characters of all time. Like there's Marvel like has a lot of iconic characters, granted, and maybe they have some in mind for Robert Pattinson if this meeting is indeed something that happened. Because the other thing is we also don't know if this is something that happened recently. This could be like old news, although I doubt that Daniel RPK would talk about something that was like years ago. But still, it's there's no character that Marvel has really at this point that we haven't already seen that Robert Pattinson would be a good fit for that you would do over Batman. I mean it could be for a cameo, it could be for a small role that shows that maybe it's like a one and done, in which case it wouldn't maybe tie into his obligations to the DC universe, the Becks that Matt Reeves is working on. But yeah, like you said, man, it's Batman. Like Kevin Feige will probably sell the farm of like the majority of Marvel characters to get his hands on Batman and Superman if he could. Like he still talks about how whenever they go to do an origin story for a new character, they look back and they sit down and watch the 1978 Christopher Reeve Superman because of how well it
Which,
did that.
I mean,
Um,
that kind of
I
works
get
some
it.
of the time, but
Yeah.
not for every origin story. That's just not how to do it. It's like if you're
Right.
going only to one source, then that's not right.
Right.
That's not the way to do
It
it.
then you're kind of making a formula out of something that maybe doesn't necessarily need to have a formula, because
Yeah, you're
we can
boxing yourself
tell different.
into one tone, one
Yeah.
movie, one type of like.
Right.
And I understand they do it because it's like, oh, it's so iconic, but it's like it's iconic for Superman and
Hmm.
characters like Superman. Like if you watched, Superman to make sure that the Captain America movie works, all right, cool. But if you're watching Superman to make sure the Punisher is done right, not the fucking thing to watch. That's
Right.
all I'm saying. So
Well, good thing Kevin
I never
Feige has
liked that.
not.
I never liked that at all.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it as more he's probably saying, this is, his way of complementing the Superman movie, and again, the importance that it holds in the cultural zeitgeist still as that first movie, which again, the modern superhero era didn't really start till the 2000s, but if we, didn't believe that a man could fly, having watched the 1978 Superman, then we wouldn't even probably have gone this far, because it was that movie which then allowed for Hollywood studios to be able to kind of really make big scale, superhero films in live action, which then led to like the movies that we got in the early 2000s with Spider-Man and the X-Men and like the Dark Knight trilogy, which have now led us to the cinematic universes that we have, such as the MCU and the DCU. With that said, of course, I doubt that this is anything significant. Of course, if something more comes out of it, we will cover it. We will follow it here. You guys let us know in the chat if you know any more than we do. But Robert Pattinson going over to Marvel right now, I just think from an optics standpoint, that's not a good idea. And I doubt that he would do anything to sort of sabotage his own prospects with DC, where he's playing probably the most important character right now. And he's certainly playing the character that,
Mhm.
currently we haven't got Superman on screen yet. So he's like the flag bearer of the DC brand as of right now. Now, with that said, John, let's switch back over to Superman, because James Gunn has been doing more interview appearances, and he recently did an interview, with Movie Zine, and one of the things that he was asked was about like the tone of Superman, and to
Mhm.
that he said, Superman is relatively serious and pretty family friendly, and I think that's exactly something that he has said many a times before. Like every time people have asked him, he's because they're like, "Are you gonna make Superman very jokey? Are we gonna have penis jokes in there like we did in the Suicide Squad? Like, what kind of tone is it going to be? Is this Guardians of the Galaxy? Because Guardians of the Galaxy and Superman don't share a ton in common." So, and you were worried about that when James Gunn first kind of came on board, and it was his Superman movie that kind of spawned the new DCU. But what do you think about his comments here? Because obviously this interview was great, but there's more quotes from him even. But
Yeah.
just kind of starting out with this, what are your thoughts on, again, pretty family friendly, and but it's at the same time pretty serious. Like it's not a movie that's just gonna be jokes all the time.
Um, yeah, that's what I was like kind of confused about. I'm like, is he just talking about the character of Superman, or is he specifically talking about the
He's talking
movie?
about the
That was like,
movie.
if
Yeah,
he's talking about the movie, I'm like, yeah, that's I think that that's definitely exciting. Even more so because it's like as much. I feel like for a lot of people, especially a lot of people I know, they're kind of they don't they hate James Gunn, they hate his comedy, they hate how he directs movies, they don't like his his whole spiel. So you know, I think I think this is a good way of show. I think we should have gotten this probably for a while. This should have come out like a long time ago, in terms of how he wanted
yeah,
to do it, because it doesn't ruin anything. It doesn't like say anything. It's just him being like, it's gonna be serious. It's gonna be family friendly. It might be like hopeful and happy, but that doesn't mean it's like gonna be like jokey all the time. That should have been from the beginning, because it would have like provided some much needed context for the people that are like, I mean, I like Guardians, I like Suicide Squad, but I don't like the
right,
idea of that director
right,
doing Superman. Like, oh, the guy who did Tromeo and Juliet and Slither doing Superman. Like that's I don't think that's for me. But the fact he's saying, okay, it's guys, it's serious. Like I understand, like there's a certain way that he does movies. Um, so I think he, you know, needed to say this for people like, Guys, look, it's not gonna be like a lot of my other movies. I'm taking this character seriously. I want to make sure he's done right. I want to make sure he's, he's done properly. And I think a little bit too late, but I think his heart and his mind are in the right place when it comes to this character. And
yeah. No,
that's what I appreciate.
absolutely, and to kind of expand on what he said, because we were looking at the tiny quotes, but here they have his full quote here, which where he said, "We have something that's relatively serious like Superman, and then something that's relatively comedic like Peacemaker, all in the same universe. Something very adult like Peacemaker, and something pretty family friendly like Superman." He also
Mhm.
earlier he said like, "Look, I think for us, we want to tell a bunch of different stories. A lot of the different stories are going to be in the DCU. Everything's going to be totally different. One of the things I love about DC Comics," says James Gunn, "is that they've always been able to tell different stories in different ways. They've told stories that were more family oriented, stories that were more adult oriented, dark stories, light stories, and he
Hmm.
seems to kind of again emphasize that the variety of ways in which DC's stories go. It doesn't look, more so than even Marvel in some ways, where Marvel has like six different heroes that are in New York, and they also have similar tones. But and not to say Marvel doesn't have stuff that's very different. They absolutely do, like Daredevil or Blade and stuff. But with DC, I think that's one of their always been one of their strengths, and I think James Gunn appreciates that. And then he goes on to say later on, he said, "I think that to be able to tell different kinds of stories is kind of what makes things fun." And one of the things I've gotten a little sick of is all these stories being relatively the same. I'm trying to step outside of that. We at DC are trying to step outside of that. Now,
Hmm.
this to me is probably even more important than what he said earlier about Superman being, relatively serious or like, still, being family friendly. Because what he's saying here addresses the point that a lot of people have been feeling. Call it superhero fatigue, call it bad movie fatigue, whatever you want to call it. To me, like if you look back at just the example of 2023's DC slate, the DCEU, right, the last throes of the cinematic universe that was, the four movies that came out felt like they were all like very similar in like tone and colors and all that stuff. And when you look at like a lot of the origin stories that they did in the DCEU, they felt similar. Like, or the Blue Beetle, for as good as it was, it felt like you've seen that movie many times before with other characters because the general story outline was very similar. The story beats were very similar. The way those movies were shot felt very like much like a house style. It's sort of the kind of thing that Marvel is known for because everything is connected, not just from a story standpoint, but visually, like the way their color palettes are, is very similar. So you
Yeah.
look at it here, and then you look at that again. What James Gunn has done before. This is the same guy did the Trauma. Like he did three Guardians of the Galaxy movies, where each movie looked and felt different visually, even though it was the same team. And to be quite frank, some of those movies feel like especially like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 didn't even feel like it was part of the same MCU that we've been used to. Like James Gunn has always done his very best to make something different that people won't feel like they have seen before. And it looks like that's his approach to the DCU. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Again, the idea that he understands this concept and he's aware of it and he's actively looking to address it.
Yeah, I think like I mean, I would say, you know, I mean, James Gunn is not an idiot. Plus, the man
Yeah.
is on social media a lot, so he understands like the stuff of like, oh, I know what people are saying about me. I know what people are like gonna take from from this movie and from the movies I've done in the past and apply it to the same, even though it's not the same. I mean, yeah, you could make the argument, oh, Suicide Squad was essentially just rated R um Guardians, which I mean you could do that definitely, but I don't think that's, I don't think that's the case here. I think he's really trying to like have some respectability for these characters and respectability for Superman, and like he wants the world to feel like different because it's like that's what the world really is. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's different cultures, different people, different experiences, different tones and aesthetics. Like you go just in the US alone, fucking Pittsburgh feels a hell of a lot different than Dallas,
Right.
like you can,
Yeah.
or it's like that. It's like it's just like how people talk to each other. The accents, a Boston accent doesn't sound like a California accent.
No. Yeah.
So it's a whole mess of like different things in culture. Like that was kind of one of the things about the US that brought people there. It was like a melting pot of cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like what I feel that it's under one banner, it's under one universe, at least for the DCU. I'm ignoring
Right.
Elseworld stories, obviously, but for the DCU, it's like, okay, yeah, Swamp Thing is not going to feel the same as Superman, which is not going to feel the same as Brave and the Bold, which is not going to be the same as Booster Gold.
Right.
So it's all going to be different. And that's what like is you know it's a different way of doing things now. Whether people like that, I don't know. We have to wait and see, but I feel it's a step in the right direction to not fall into superhero fatigue, which Gunn has spoken out against many times. It's like he's like, I liked Marvel, I liked working at Marvel, but it's no surprise that they're kind of failing right now, is because movies are being cranked by assembly line. They feel the same. They look the same. The like they don't give enough time for post production duties. I think Fantastic Four First Steps just finished filming, and they have like maybe like 7 months of post production. But
Yeah.
even then, that's kind of pushing it a little bit. Um, so it's just
Right.
he wants to create like this lived in world that feels different from one another, and I appreciate that. And he's like it, and it feels very loose. It feels
Mm-hmm.
very regimented but loose at the same time. Like he's like,
Yeah.
okay, Andy Muschietti, you're doing Batman, cool, do whatever you feel is necessary. Just make sure to keep it in this parameter. So like you can't like make it so that Batman is like a bat creature of the night and is like, like that. Like you got to keep it in this parameter, but essentially go crazy, go
Yeah.
nuts.
No. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Tom King, Damon Lindelof, Chris Mundy. Okay, you got to keep it in this parameter. We have this plan, so just do this, and then but
Yeah.
go with yourself.
No.
And I
Fair.
think I personally like that way of thinking more than rather than this. It's like this thing you have to do this and this and this and this. You can't do this and this and this. If you do this and this, so you're out, you're done. And then getting rid of talent like Patty Jenkins and Edgar Wright and the 17 directors that have worked on Blade and like all these other really talented people. They're like, we left to creative differences. And it's just like, well, how about let them be creative, And
Right.
I think that's what James Gunn is doing.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that personally
Yeah.
as
No,
a filmmaker.
I agree with you 100%. But also like in this article before we finish this topic, there is a mention that of course there's rumors that the trailer will get released on December 9th, which look, that came from Grace Randolph, so I wouldn't necessarily trust it as far as James Gunn related stuff goes, but um, we also were told, I believe by like a couple of other scoopers, right? There were reports last week, if I remember correctly, that the trailer will go, or was it a Collider exclusive? I forget if it was a Collider exclusive. It might have been that, where they were like the trailer's gonna debut behind Mufasa the Lion King, coming out later
Hmm.
this holiday season. Now, there have been rumblings online, which this article points out, that the teaser might be similar to the first Barbie sneak peek, and as in we won't really get a ton of footage from the movie itself. And I feel like the thing that we got from there was like the opening scene of the movie, which was like a recreation of the 2001 A Space Odyssey, except instead of being apes, they were like little girls smashing their Barbie dolls because they saw the big Margot Robbie Barbie doll that
Hmm.
wasn't just your average old school 1800s like creepy huge doll. It was like a Barbie, which I wouldn't mind that. Like I think if that's the direction they go in, I think that could make for a nice sneak peek. I actually quite honestly expect that to be the case, and that's what I've been sort of advocating for, even because I remember the first thing we got from the Batman was like the suit reveal with like him in like the
Hmm.
red, and then the Michael Giacchino score, and that just got people so hyped. And then when the first trailer dropped, they were ready for it. And I think if they're gonna try to extend this out to be like a whole summer of Superman, then that's the perfect place to start it. But we'll see. I mean, these are still just rumblings and rumors. Take it with a grain of salt. For all we know, we will get a full trailer. But if we don't, I still think it could be great. Now, with that
Hmm.
said, John, we do have one more Superman related item here, and I believe this was from the same interview where James Gunn took another thinly veiled
Reiterating the
shot
same
at
fucking
the
thing over
MCU,
again.
where he basically said the DCU won't. I mean, this kind of again paraphrasing. I don't think he worded it this way, that the DCU won't be like Marvel because nothing is greenlit before we have a finished script, which we keep talking about. I feel like we talked about it earlier in the week that this has been his approach, and Steve G and everybody else seems to toe the party line. But again, he said it when they first announced the DC slate with the DCU about a year and a half ago at this point, that we won't like greenlight anything. We won't put anything into production until we're really happy with the script. It's the storytelling comes first. The story comes first. And that seems to be a common occurrence, not a common occurrence in Marvel necessarily, but like across even Hollywood, where a lot of movies sometimes can go into production without a completely finished script. Like the Mission Impossible movies are known for that. They're very loose with their scripting. Edge of Tomorrow was famous for like they didn't have much of a script when the movie went into production. And they kind of figured it out
That's
as
the
they went.
exception, not the rule.
Right,
So
you don't want to do that, but it,
you
it,
don't
it
want to
does
fucking do
happen.
that.
Yes, but and then of course, there's like the Blade situation where they greenlit it, they brought Marsha Ali onto a stage at an event like a Comic-Con or a D23, whatever it was, and yet today we still don't have a movie.
Because
So James Gunn
apparently
just doesn't want to
a
do
guy who
that.
fights vampires is way too hard for Marvel to figure out.
Yeah. But John, what are your thoughts on this? Is this surprise you? Again, it kind of
I
reinforces what James Gunn
agree.
seems to say all the time.
I agree. Nothing more to say because I've said I'd agree in the past. I agree now. So, that's it. He's gonna
Yeah.
keep saying it. But I kind of, you know, I see it
Well,
why, but like I agree. He has his way and he's gonna do it his way, and I appreciate that. So boom, there you go.
yeah. Yep, I hear you, and it's not surprising. He said it before, and the comments, by the way, on this are of course what you expect. Trying to think of a Blade shade gag and coming up short, because you can't really answer that back and be like, well, you know.
Light of day, vampires. I'll show myself out.
Yeah, just a bunch of dad jokes. But yeah, again, James Gunn trying to make sure that they don't repeat the mistakes. He said like he's been in those situations. He is not necessarily himself, but he's been a part of an environment. Again, really thinly veiled, take or jab at the Marvel, the way of doing things
I mean,
essentially.
Frank Grillo's been
So
shitting on Marvel for like
for
years. So
but I don't think he cares to get another job with Marvel in the near future. I think James Gunn, though, on the other hand, wants to keep a good relationship because, like, if the DCU fails, like, and they let him go, like, James Gunn always had really good prospects over at Marvel. But plus, it's also like, you don't want to dump on a company for the sake of just dumping on them. Like, I think Marvel does some great work. Like, they've made $30+ billion. That's the most successful franchise ever, the MCU. So they did a few things right. Now, with that said, John, we had to move over to a fan casting. The one that we have chosen for today is
yeah,
Captain Marvel, or nowadays DC refers to it as Shazam. And of
I
course,
don't.
if you clicked on the thumbnail, one of the names might be Chris Pratt, but that's not where we're gonna start, John. What is your list of names that you want to potentially see as our Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, in the new DCU, and why? Why would you like to see them? Let's start with the first one that you've got.
Yeah. So what I wanted to so I as I've said many times before, like I was kind of following the Justice League International lineup, and Captain Marvel was a part of that lineup. So I'm like, okay. And I think he's a really awesome character. I mean, the Shazam movies are my favorite DCU movies, period. Like Shazam is great. Fury of the Gods is underrated.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the real best superhero 2023 superhero movie in red featuring a lightning bolt on his chest, that the real one, not the other one. We don't talk about the other one, but the real one. But like I think like going off of those two movies, I think they were great. um the second one did have some problems, but overall both are great. Casts were great. Asher Angel, Zachary Levi, all great. But it's like, okay, maybe they want to do something fresh and new. It's unlikely that we'll ever get Captain Marvel in the near future. We'll probably
Mm-hmm.
get him maybe like far eventually, but
Yeah.
I do have, ironically, the first three I have, well, three out of four are all the same age. I didn't plan it like that. It just so happened that it just kind of worked for that.
Yeah.
But the first one I have is, in fact, John Krasinski as Captain
Ah.
Marvel, as the actual like adult. And we're not talking about Billy Batson. We're only talking about the actual like adult superhero. It's just John Krasinski has done an even balance of stuff over the years. Like, yeah, I mean, he nails both because he started out in comedy,
Right.
like stuff like The Office, like that. He showed like his acting chop. And the thing is, Jim Halpert kind of acted like a bit of a man child a little bit sometimes. So like that like works for that iteration, because I know I mean the character wasn't originally like that. It was just
Mm-hmm.
like it was two different entities that just
Mm-hmm.
so happened to like have like the same body kind of. But now it's like no, it's like big where it's like the mind of a kid in an
Mm-hmm.
adult body, which I think works for comedy purposes.
Right.
But it's just John Krasinski has proven that like yeah, he can do comedy, but now with like fucking Jack Ryan and like
Mm-hmm.
Quiet Place, he can
I mean,
do these
Wendell
like the
Pierce is already gonna be our
yeah,
like Daily
perfect. There you go.
Planet. Yeah.
But I think John Krasinski, yeah, he's a little bit older. As I said, they're all most of my guys are 45 years old. Um, but I
Mm-hmm.
think he's proven himself as an action hero. With like stuff like Jack Ryan, he has a little bit of superhero clout with Mr. Fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
and I think he can do like the action hero like vibe, but also do like sort of like the little kid in an adult's body very well as well. Like it would I know he doesn't do a ton of comedy nowadays, but
Mm-hmm.
like I think going back to that would be like a perfect balance for Krasinski because like I don't mind like the serious stuff he does. I like the serious stuff he does. And there, Johnny Vitti, there he is. But I think what I think like having that equal blend of like the best things that Krasinski has done would work
Mm-hmm.
for him in the long run. I think he might be too big of a name, but I think he would. He's not big. He's not like
Yeah.
huge or anything. Maybe he needs to bulk up a little bit, but I think he most definitely would work as Captain Marvel. I think he would be
Yeah.
really, really good.
It would just be like his style of humor would be very different from like what we got in the two Shazam movies,
Right.
though, right? Like that's so I think that is what would stand out the most. But I think that's a great pick. But yeah, John Krasinski, he's done a lot of stuff behind the cameras recently, but I certainly think he could do a good job with this one too. But yeah, let's
Yeah,
continue
maybe
on.
even direct the
Yeah,
movie
yeah. I mean, maybe he can write and direct and star in the movie. That'd be fun.
and
Yeah,
produce it
and
and
produce it.
edit it
Yeah,
and do the
yeah,
cinematography.
and
Just go
everything.
full Robert
It would
Rodriguez, El Mariachi on it. Just
written, directed, acted,
I don't think he
produced,
writes his
edited
stuff
by
though. I think he only directs. I don't think he's ever
yeah,
written anything.
yeah.
But I think that would be awesome. But moving on to the next choice now, I know this may seem obvious during one of the superhero things, but I'm more so leaning to the other superhero thing he's done in regards to my pick for the next Captain Marvel. And I actually did choose Brandon Routh as one of my picks for Captain Marvel. Now it's like, oh, yeah, of course, he played Superman. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about him as Ray Palmer because Ray Palmer has at least this iteration, even though it's nothing like the comic,
Mhm.
was so much like a kid in an adult body, like like he just like
Yes.
has this like
He had a
cheesy, like
also just a
childlike
charm. Yeah.
energy, like that charm,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That like we're and not saying like like Ray Palmer was always like that. It
Mhm.
just like he definitely had a Clark Kent vibe, not gonna lie. And his Clark Kent kind of feeds into that as well. But I think Brandon Routh is a good enough actor. He's proven himself enough. He has a ton of superhero clout. And if he wants to go back into the worlds of superheroes, I don't think he was.
Mhm.
I mean, he was on Legends of Tomorrow for a while.
The
So I
whole
think he
series. He was
probably
one of the few actors who didn't get swapped out throughout the seasons. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think he left for the last season
Oh,
because he
did
was kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
sick of
yeah.
it. But for the most part, he stayed on. So I think he probably wants to take a break from superhero stuff. But Brandon Routh, I think, as much as I hate the fucking suit because they just made him Iron Man, but can shrink,
Right.
I don't like that. But outside of that, I think it showed the intelligence. I think it showed the like childlike energy. Again, it would be
Mhm.
very different from Levi and what Krasinski could bring, but it definitely, I think he could definitely
It's
be a
yeah.
slightly more stoic Captain Marvel, but at the same time, a even more childlike
I
Captain
think
Marvel as
yeah,
well.
he would have a sense of charm and wit and like that sincerity, that humbleness, where he would play it more straight than maybe Zachary Levi even did, where Zachary Levi's was much more comedic. I think he could play it in a more earnest way. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Like
Yeah.
I think Brendan Routh's
Yeah, and
Shazam
if
could
you
be
look
much
at
more
him
earnest.
in the Superman in the Kingdom
Yeah.
Come Superman suit he wore, he's huge. So
He is.
he's
He can bulk up
bulky.
easily. He's done it
He's
twice before. So
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying like, oh, um, John Krasinski is it? It's just John Krasinski has more of an athletic build and he's not as
Yeah.
broad. Now, in terms of like Captain Marvel, he's supposed to be like peak human condition kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think Brandon Routh kind of fits the physicality a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Like kind of what Henry Cavill more so was in like BVS. Like that's kind of the energy I'm like looking for in regards to that. Like because I mean, a lot of people made fun of Zachary Levi for not being as big as The Rock, and it's like, how
Mm-hmm.
the fuck can this puny guy fight off against The Rock? And it's just like, well, look how that turned out. But I think Routh definitely his role as Ray Palmer and as Superman and his physicality, his wit, his acting ability, his comedy, I think he would be an awesome Captain Marvel, but it's unlikely considering that he was a superhero for so long. So obviously we would have to like see that. I don't think he would want to, but like I think he could do a really good job as Captain Marvel. So
Yeah.
that's how that's what I think. Now we move on to the guy in the bottom part that is on the thumbnail. I mean, it's a joke at this point, but like honestly, I can fucking see it. Like I could see Chris Pratt as Captain Marvel. Um, Not gonna lie. I think he would be, you know, I just think like just Andy Dwyer, but as like a superhero. Essentially, that's what it is.
That'd be
Like that
perfect.
I mean, like Andy Dwyer as a superhero. I mean, he's already like he has dog energy, like golden retriever energy. He has kind of like a kid like energy where he's like, you shock wire. If you touch it, you die. Like, that's like the vibe. Like, I think Chris Pratt fits that in well. He has like again some physicality. He's not he kind of is like in between like John Krasinski and um Brandon Routh in terms of like physicalness. He's broad, but he's not quite as big as Brandon Routh. But I think he would do a good job. Like I think he is like kind of has that cool vibe like that Brandon Routh and Krasinski don't really have. I think Krasinski when he is serious, he's just like kind of like action hero determination. With Brandon Routh, he's just like very stoic and earnest, as you said. I think Chris Pratt, when he's like not being silly, he's just kind of cool, which I think would take away a little bit from like him as Captain Marvel, but I think his level of comedy, his physicality, and again acting ability, and he's worked with James Gunn before. So I think like if he does, I mean, when he eventually gets killed off in Avengers Secret Wars or whenever the fuck he does come back, because they're definitely going to kill off Star Lord because now everybody hates Chris Pratt, so they're going to kill him off. So when that eventually happens, they're like, all right, James Gunn, hey buddy, I worked with you on 3 movies. Let's go. Let's come on. Let's have you over for DC, whether it's Booster Gold, Captain Marvel, whatever the fuck that they plan to do. So, I think him in red, that works, right? Yeah, he's in red, and Shazam, Captain Marvel's red. It works. Shush. But I know like everyone is sick of Chris Pratt. I know everybody hates Chris Pratt, and this maybe it was clickbaity, but like honestly, like I think he would work as both Booster Gold and Captain Marvel. I think he would work. I think he would probably work better as Captain Marvel because I think like he could work as Booster Gold, but I think like the Andy Dwyerness is in my head, and I think that would work far better in this context. In this context than Booster Gold, but I think he would do both pretty well. And I still like Chris Pratt. Like I like him. I think he's got the charisma, he's got the acting ability. It's just like unlike Routh or Krasinski that can do that comedy well, and he can. It's just I think he might be too cool as because Star Lord is kind of has that vibe of like cool, but like also kind of not, but like kind of is, and maybe that could work depending on like how you interpret the character. But I think him as Captain Marvel would be pretty awesome, and I think he could definitely make that work. But yeah, I think and it's but he has that added nature of like, oh, James Gunn. But in terms of stuff that's actually announced, Booster Gold would make more sense because nothing has had Captain Marvel, you know, at all. Like anything announced, unannounced. I don't think they're going to bring Captain Marvel in because Fury of the Gods was a bomb. It wasn't critically received. It was nominated for a bunch of Razzies, which I still think is bullshit. But I I I I really like this character, and I think he deserves time to shine again. And whoever they do get, they won't get David F. Sandberg because he's like, I'm taking a break. I need a break from superhero shit. So I think, yeah, I think that definitely, I think Chris Pratt would be really good. Now, the last person I have, I'm not too familiar with him, but the reason I picked him is because he's very young and he was fan casted for Superman a lot. And from what little I've seen of him in like clips and stuff that I did to research this, I think he could nail like again the charisma, but like also like the kind of childlike nature of it. And that's I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Wolfgang Novogratz. He was one of the many names of like to like play Superman. I because David Cornswet was a big fan casting, and I think and Wolfgang Novogratz was also a name that I saw a lot. I mean, he was a model. He kind of has like you kind of look at him and he's like kind of has that like kind of shit eating grin. He had like that cheesy kind of look to him, but I think he has more of that look for like I think he kind of works better as Captain Marvel in a way because Captain Marvel is like a very like picturesque like view of a humanity because the way that it kind of was initially I don't know if this was confirmed in later comics, but I remember in the earlier comics like Golden Age I'm talking about was that Captain Marvel was like what Billy Batson imagined his father would look like, who like we all if we like don't have a father figure or we don't like see him a lot, we view him as like this perfect kind of like superhero, like he can do anything, but he like has like it's like this picturesque like Olympian of greatness kind of thing. And I think that definitely fits here. And he also fits with the age a little bit more. Now, I don't know if they would want someone so like young. He is 27. That might be a little bit too young. I would imagine they would want to pick someone in their 30s where like he could be the father of Billy Batson, but not like 40s because if they want to have a lot of movies with him and like once they eventually get a Captain Marvel movie off the ground, if they do, then I think the three actors I chose earlier would probably be too old, probably be in their like mid to late 50s at that certain point. So like maybe like I'm imagining it like okay, maybe eventually if they get it off the ground like 10 years from now, this guy would be the perfect age for that. He would be in his like mid to late 30s. So that's what I kind of imagine. Like again, he has the model. I mean, he was a model, so he kind of has the model look. He, from what little I've seen, he kind of has like that kind of just cheesy energy. He's pretty well built, and I think like I mean, as many people like say, even though Captain Marvel and Superman are two very different characters, I think they kind of go hand in hand a little bit with in terms of like morality and how they view the world. It's just like how Clark Kent is a lot of ways. He is like kind of like that kid because it's like he's like the true like heart of gold kind of guy, and that's how a child kind of usually sees the world. Like they just kind of see it as good or bad, and so it I really like that, and I still think that that would fit with him. And and the thing is, he hasn't done a lot. Well, Chris Pratt, Brandon Routh, and John Krasinski are pretty big known names. He's kind of really unknown. The only thing he's done recently is like Tarot, which was like this shitty like I think it was a Blumhouse horror movie that sucked. So he's done like some indie movies, so he's not incredibly well known. So this might you know jump his filmography, but yeah. And then as well as the fact you could bring Zachary Levi back. Now I know he's a controversial figure now, but if we just ignore that, like I do think he did a really good job in the role. I think he I think he like had the perfect level of wit, of charisma, of acting ability, and like childlike energy that I think worked. But like there was a lot of moments in like Fury of the Gods where he, did have some more serious like levels of like portrayal. And even if they wait a long time, it would be kind of funny, like, if we don't see Captain Marvel for, like, another, like, 10, 15 years, we could even get Asher Angel as Captain Marvel. I think that would be kind of funny. That would have been like if we got one of the original kids from the It miniseries to play the adult version, like, in the Andy Muschietti movies, that it would have been like that. I think that could be, like, kind of funny. But I think Zachary Levi still did a really good job, and I really liked how he had like a good amount of development as well. Like in the original movie, it was like he's like, I don't want a family, I don't want to do, these people aren't my family. I want to find my mom, I want to find my real family, but like I don't want these people, they're not my real family. But it's like he learned that like family isn't blood related. It's like who you like get along with, who you it's like it can go more than just who you share blood with.
What's real is family.
I mean, yeah, like that yeah, that's really what it is. And I mean, he even mentioned in the see, I've seen all the Fast and Furious movies, and there's something about family. And then like, yeah, it works. That was one of the few times where it actually worked. But yeah, I think and I liked how in the second one he doubles down on the fact of like having a family. He's like, okay, I have this family now. I can't let them go. I can't let them go because then they'll leave me. Then they'll stop loving me. And if I can't do that, I can't deal with that. I need to stick with them. They need to do what I have to say. I'm the leader. And then he's dealing with the pressure of like growing up as a kid, growing as a superhero, having this family. And I think those ideas could have been executed a hell of a lot better, but I think what we did get in terms of him as this leader, as like like trying his best, I think it worked. I think like we definitely got that vibe from him, and it shows that like, and he's dealt with the character before. I think having him in the DCU would be awesome, but it depends what James Gunn wants to do. And if we're getting that character anytime soon, he might be a little bit too old when they do get around to this character again. So, I love this character. I think Zachary Levi was part of the reason why I kind of fell in love with this character. And I would love to see him again soon, but I understand James Gunn has a plan, and I don't think Captain Marvel is part of that, plan anytime soon. But I know he loves Justice League International. Captain Marvel was a part of Justice League International, so there's the possibility, like, maybe, but it's unlikely. But I hope for the future that we do get him because he's pretty awesome, and whoever they do get will be the right choice. That auditions and whatnot probably pick a good, relatively good nobody. So yeah. Captain Marvel for the win. Not Shazam. Captain Marvel.
No, I agree with you, John. I think it wasn't it's not ideal to kind of bring Zachary Levi back for the role, especially now because people will be confused between the previous movie set of movies and how it ties into the
I
new
mean, they're bringing back
Captain
Amanda
movie.
Waller and
I know they
Sheila
did. Well,
Margolia and
yes,
John Cena.
true. But also, again, there's like DC's trying to avoid the controversies beyond the the cinema
Right.
screens and all, right? So, and Zachary Levi hasn't exactly been the most likable person in recent times. But it's still, he did a great job with the character. And like you said, even Shazam, Fear of the Gods is a little underrated. I really loved the first Shazam movie. And again, it's, you see him in Philadelphia, which is one of the few real life cities that DC actually has, because most of their characters live in like, fictional, iterations of like New York, like Gotham City, for example, or Star City, Starling City, or like Central City or Metropolis. But whether it's like you said, whether it's Chris Pratt, whether it's Brendan Routh, whether it's John Krasinski, or even Wolfgang Novogratz, who would be a very unknown commodity, or like somebody like Zachary Levi coming back in the role. He's expressed that he would like to be back in the role, so he loves the character. And his brand of comedy worked for me, so I wouldn't mind it. But I mean, it's great to see that there's a lot of good options out there, and maybe even beyond the ones we have chosen. I'm sure James Gunn will have other actors on his list, or people who send in tapes and audition for the role. But yeah, that's the fan casting, guys, for Shazam, aka Captain Marvel, as John said. And of course, it is ultimately at the end of the day, one of the biggest selling points for the Shazam character is the Shazam family.
Your brother never told you never threaten a man's family?
And of course, today is Thanksgiving, so it's perfect.
Spend some time with your family.
Exactly.
If you have one. Yeah, I mean, if you don't, that's
well,
okay.
It's not just about the family that you grew up with or were born into. It's also the one that you choose to spend your time with, right? Like chosen family versus But yeah, and by the way, the timing of that photo with Helen Mirren and then the whole Vin Diesel thing, perfect. We nailed that.
It's almost
one.
like it was planned or something.
It was almost right, exactly. I don't know. We don't like to spill our secrets. The magic sauce that we have, such as what Shazam likes to dig into, so that he can take down Superman. That would be, I would love to see that. Like we never got to redo the hierarchy of power or change the hierarchy of power in the DC universe with Black Adam, but I still would love to see characters like Shazam and Black Adam come across Superman because of the power dynamics.
Let's get someone who's not The Rock to play Black Adam, please. Yes. For the love of God.
Plenty of other options out there.
Get an actual Egyptian. That would be cool.
Yes. Maybe that could be a fan casting we do soon.
Rami Malek as Black Adam. No, I'm just kidding.
I think that's a step too far, but maybe there's another.
Nah, he's the amateur. He's not Black Adam. He's the amateur. Which honestly, that movie looks really good. I'm just gonna say.
Yes. Well, guys, hope you are having a fantastic Thanksgiving. And if you're, living in another part of the world, if you're abroad and not in the U.S. and you do not celebrate Thanksgiving, then we hope that you're having a fantastic day and hopefully a great weekend ahead. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of DCU Daily. Until then, you can hit that like button, toggle the subscribe button, and then as John is doing, tickle or ring that bell, so that way we can get you the latest updates and you can know when we are live with another show or have a new video going out. But until next time on DCU Daily, we hope that you have a great rest of your afternoon. Go watch something DC related, come back and talk to us about it. And John, I'll see you tomorrow, and I think we got Liz on the show tomorrow as well. So until then, guys, have a fantastic day. We'll talk to you next time on DCU Daily.